Here at Charlie Crimebuster, we welcome comments, suggestions, opinions, and whether you agree or disagree with our view on a topic, we still want to hear from you. Reach out with a shout-out. Email Charlie at charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Or you can call or text us at 407-917-2211. That's 407-917-2211. And we'd like to thank our sponsor, PeacemakerNetwork.com, and also thank those of you who already support our podcast. Did you know that your donations not only help with this podcast, but also support the brave men and women, first responders, law enforcement, correction officers, security personnel, and our military? You too can donate, as well as become a monthly badge member. That's BADGE member by simply subscribing to PeacemakerNetwork.com. That's PeacemakerNetwork.com. And if you're a true crime junkie, we would like to encourage you to binge-cast by listening to our podcasts located on many of the popular podcast platforms. Simply search for Charlie Crimebuster, or you can ask your smart speaker to play Charlie Crimebuster. But since you're streaming us here on YouTube tonight, simply click on the subscribe button and you'll be notified each time we drop a new episode. So please do us that huge favor and press that subscribe button right now. And we thank you. The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are solely those of the individuals interviewed or participating and do not represent those of Charlie Crimebuster nor Peacemaker Network. All individuals described or mentioned in the presentation should be considered innocent until found guilty in a court of law.
The Karen Reed murder retrial, one witness tells it all. We're going to talk about that podcast today, James Buckland and I, as we talk about the murder trial of Karen Reed. Glad to have you on board. What a retrial this has been. We like to share maybe some new stuff on our Crime Talk because the people catch us in the middle of the week, sort of.
Right.
And there was one day this week when there wasn't any visibility in court because court was delayed, denied, and actually they went dark a day. And if you're wondering why that happened, folks, the word is that the best that we can figure out, and I believe it's been verified by 2 or 3 sources now, that it appeared that Karen Reed was ill yesterday. This is on a Wednesday. That would have been on a Tuesday if you're keeping up in real time in the week. But today they were right back at it, and a lot more for us to cover on the next podcast, James.
All right, good. Well, in this retrial of the century, as we call it, you spoke where you thought that people were all coming down on their view of the trial. Tell us about that.
Well, you know what I've seen in looking and watching people. And observing a lot of the responses, I think that a whole lot of people actually made up their mind in the first trial, and I think that really dives over into this next trial. And what I'm seeing is the people that thought that Karen Reed was guilty in the first trial, that anytime anything good happens for the prosecution, they're right there. And the people who thought that she wasn't guilty, then anything happens for the defense, they're right there. It's really difficult to find anybody that's really neutral in this trial. It appears that everybody's on one side or the other, doesn't it?
That's right. Yeah. Well, how do you think Jenifer McCabe did on her testimony this past week previous, but on the podcast?
Yeah, well, she was certainly an explosive witness and spent a lot of time there. The only person that spent more time is our sergeant who was on the trial this week. But for 3 days, he was under cross-examination and that sort of thing. But Jenifer McCabe, she was a key witness by far, and it appears that in the last trial that she really got very defensive, and I think she didn't have a lot of control. In this trial, I think that she's a little more settled. I believe she's doing a lot better job in responding to the cross-examination and the questions. She doesn't seem quite as rattled as she was in that first trial. So over and all, I think she did a really good job when she was on the stand. However, she's facing probably one of the most I would imagine aggressive cross examinations that I've seen in a long time,
Hmm.
both with her and with the other witnesses that are on the trial.
Well, Charlie, you mentioned some tense words. What did you mean by that?
Well, it was some really, 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 some really good fireworks and lots of, I heard somebody talk yesterday,
Hmm.
watching some of the newscasts talking about Perry Mason moments. So, you and
Yeah,
I mentioned that last week,
yeah.
and I guess that is the thing. So there've been several Perry Mason moments in this trial, and I think one of the time that was where they really got pretty into it was when Alan Jackson actually pressed McCabe on the discrepancies in her testimony. Um, she basically said, "There's nothing about calling my sister," and of course that was about the fact that she left out calling her sister
Hmm.
when she was talking to the feds.
Hmm.
And when he brought that up, she come back and she said, "Well, there's nothing about calling my sister that is nefarious." That referring, to not remembering the details. And so, Jackson got right back at her, said nefarious, and I didn't use that word. Why are you using that word? Is there something nefarious going on? And so, they went back to that. She said, I just feel like you're insinuating it, and it might be, and it's not. So there was some pretty tense moments during that time. A lot of drama with that. Courtroom can be very boring, but then you have moments like that when it really just you can see everybody's interest peak.
Yeah.
Peak when those things go on. So yeah,
Oh,
there
yeah.
was there was some give and take there, and I think that McCabe did pretty doggone good standing up to some really tough questions.
Well, where do you think Jackson made points on Jennifer's cross?
Well, I think he made a lot of points because he had a lot of material, yeah, and this is true with just about every witness.
Hmm.
They have a lot of material to go through. I mean, they can go through back that whole first trial. There's not only, the first trial, there's also grand jury proceedings. Beyond that, there was, that these folks have also sat down, to all sorts of questioning in
Hmm.
all sorts of situations, questioned by the police. There were times when the attorneys themselves have opportunity to talk to the witnesses before they get to trial. So they had a lot of material, and Jackson was very good. It looks like he's gone through it all because he brought up just about every inconsistent thing she ever said from the time this thing started, and I think he made a whole lot of points. I think the greatest point I think he made was when he brought out the fact that that it really looks like that she was hiding
Hmm.
from the feds, the fact that she had called her sister. Now, there wasn't anything wrong with calling her sister.
Hmm.
What was wrong was that she tried to shield her sister and she tried to hide the fact. That's the way it appeared to me, and I'm sure it appeared to the jury,
Oh,
that
yeah.
she was hiding the fact that before she talked to the feds, she called her sister.
Hmm.
And she's right. Nothing nefarious about calling your sister, but it could be nefarious about the fact that you left it out
Right.
and you
Right.
didn't talk about it. So I think there was, and I think there was another time too that I thought he made some really good points, and that was when they were talking about the fact that John, of course, was lying there in the snow and that terrible, terrible morning, and in that blizzard, and he needs help, and they're there trying to resuscitate him and do everything they can, and he pointed out the fact that her brother-in-law
Hmm.
was just like 30 feet away in that house.
Hmm.
He was a first responder.
Hmm.
He had been trained in first aid. He had been trained in responding to people in crisis.
Hmm.
And, I think a lot of us thought, well, why didn't she? It was just he was 30 feet away. Why didn't she go in the house and get him and say, "Hey, man,
Exactly.
one of your cop buddies is lying in your lawn. We need help."
Right.
But she called everybody, talked to everybody, but it is really strange that she did not summon, a first responder, a dedicated first responder. Why she did not, ask
Yeah.
him to come out or get a hold of him. And I think that there's just a whole lot of questions. There was a town hall meeting last night up there where the trial is being held. I think Court TV was putting it on, and a lot of the audience was able to respond, and it was really neat to me to judge which way I thought the audience was leaning in
Right.
that, and the audience, a lot of them brought out the fact, that she said. In fact, she asked the lawyers who were on the other side in this panel. She said, "What? How do you guys handle all these seemingly coincidences?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Is it a coincidence that he did not come out that morning? Is there a coincidence that he sold his house?" And I didn't realize this, but James, when Brian Albert sold their house and got rid of their house, they took a $50,000 dive on that. You know, they sold it for $50,000 less than what it was worth,
Wow.
and then that was brought out, and so that's strange, isn't it?
That's
The fact that he refloored his basement, where the defense is at least indicating that there's a possibility that John O'Keefe was beat up in the basement, and so the fact that you refloored it, that you got rid of. What's interesting to me is that from what I'm picking up, and I don't know that I picked it up in the first trial or not. I should have. Maybe I did and forgot it. But that morning, when she did go into the home and when people were around the home,
uh-huh.
nobody referred to seeing the dog, and the dog didn't bark. And this dog was a German Shepherd, so the inference there is that they might have gotten rid of the dog that night.
Mm-hmm.
And if they did that, that makes it even more suspicious.
Exactly.
Now
Exactly.
I'm not saying that they got rid of the dog that night. We do know though that that dog had been with them 7 years. Who does that? Who gets rid of a pet
Mm-hmm.
that is, that you love? I love my pets. I'm sure everybody loves their pets, but
Mm-hmm.
after 7 years, why do you just get rid of your pet?
Exactly.
Unless you're afraid of something going on there. So you have that. You have the fact that everybody came out of the house, nobody saw the body, so none of this, in my opinion, proves that he was beat up in the house, but it sure does make you wonder. And of
Absolutely.
course, and of course, that's exactly what Alan Jackson is doing is trying to show that there is reasonable doubt in this whole case.
Absolutely. Well, what did you mean by circling the wagons, though? You used the term circling the wagons.
Yes, you know, circling wagons, of course, is a old fashioned term, I guess. Back during the wagon trains when they were out there in the Wild West and there was danger all around. And so when they
Mhm.
would take their treat, as they're taking their journey, they would circle the wagons as a kind of a way of protection for them.
Right.
And this is another thing that seems really, really strange in this case is that one of the things that Alan Jackson was referring to when he was talking to Karen Reed on cross examination is, the reason you made these calls before you talked to the feds, even though you had just seen them, the reason you made these calls, he is saying, could it be that you all were trying to get your story straight?
Right.
Were you all trying to be on the same page? It was
Uh-huh.
basically what he was saying.
Right.
And there is certainly I think nobody will doubt the fact that there was among this crowd that was in the house that night, there is certainly circling of the wagons. You can see that they're all coming together,
Mm-hmm.
and they're all saying the same thing. You might say, and you think about the fact that we talk about another coincidence. Brian Albert got rid of his phone,
Mm-hmm.
and so did another Brian. Brian Higgins, he got rid of his phone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like but on the other hand, I can see their side of it, and I do want to point this out because I don't want to think I don't think that I'm pro defense or pro prosecution at this point. I'm just trying to see how it all comes to be, but law enforcement has always had that strong blue line, that wall of blue, you might say,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
and it's very natural for police officers to do that because you're out there, you're facing a lot of crime, you're facing some really bad people, and
Mm-hmm.
you depend on each other. So you have that bond already. And keep in mind that a lot of the people that are involved that were in the house all have a lot of connections to law enforcement.
Right.
And think about this, James. If I am a police officer and I know how these things go, and I know that somebody died on my front lawn, and I know that I'm going to be involved in this whole thing. And if I had some things that were embarrassing on my phone that may not have anything to do with the case whatsoever, I might want to get rid of my phone too,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
before they come and get it, right?
exactly.
And so I believe you could logically explain why both the Bryans got rid of their phone. Now, they could get rid of their phone because there was something on those phones that would tie them to this case. Or
Incriminate
they
them.
may, yeah,
Yeah.
incriminate, or they may have just got rid of the phones because they didn't want anybody to go, think about what happened to Proctor with his phone.
Mm-hmm.
Look
Mm-hmm.
at the embarrassment that he has. I mean, how would, let's say to the people that are out there right now that are listening, how would you like it if your phone suddenly became public knowledge of everybody in the world?
Exactly.
If on national television they were reading a text where you may have said something bad about another person,
Yeah,
wouldn't that be embarrassing?
absolutely.
So you could see that circling their wagons may not be as to borrow Jennifer McCabe's word, may not be as nefarious as some people are thinking.
Right, right.
Just some things to think about there.
Well, let's take a short break and break away from the conversation of the second trial and tell us about this week's crazy crook story.
We never really run we never run out of this. This was what yeah, I don't know that she's really a crazy crook, but she was so crazy we put her in the crazy crook hat anyhow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess I got on my soapbox a little bit in this last podcast because I shake my head in amazement of the emotional maturity that we have in this country today. It's just amazing to me.
Uh-huh.
I mean, emotional maturity, to me means that you control your emotions,
Yeah.
and that you keep a cool head about you.
Right.
But we're not seeing that in today's society. Even last week, I read about another, and I'm saying another. I've lost count of how many people who've shot each other over a parking place.
Uh-huh.
I mean, literally,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah.
literally
Yeah.
a stupid parking place, and you pull out your gun and you shoot somebody. Now think about that. You take somebody's life, you take somebody's husband, somebody's wife, you take somebody's father,
Yeah.
somebody's son
Yeah.
over a parking place, and then on top of that, you end up going to prison for the rest of your life.
Uh-huh.
That doesn't make sense to me.
Doesn't
And
compute.
yeah, and our crazy crook is right down that line. And isn't it amazing how many of these situations we read about happen at fast food restaurants?
I know, right? It's crazy.
I mean, it's crazy stuff like this.
Yeah.
Pulling a gun on somebody in a drive-through.
Yeah.
I mean, it's happening in this country. Well, this lady was at Chick-fil-A, and man, how can you get mad at Chick-fil-A? They always say, "My pleasure," when you ask for something, right?
That's right. That's
Can
right.
I have some more Coke? My pleasure. I
Uh-huh.
mean, very polite. But this lady gets all riled up about her order to the point, James, that while she's coming through the drive-through, she gets out of her car and confronts some little probably teenager standing out there handing them bags and is all emotional and all upset. But guess what? She forgot. She forgot to put her car in park. And so while she jumps out, the car just starts rolling down the road, and suddenly she's chasing after it. Can you imagine the scene? I mean, it's hilarious to
Oh.
me. Here's this lady, and she turns around. Oh, there goes my car. And then it turns around and goes over an embankment. She gets in the car. She didn't get killed, thank God. But as a result of it all, her entire car is totaled after it goes
Oh.
over the bank. So we actually graduated her from just being a crazy kook to the crazy crook fame, wall of
Hall,
fame,
Wall of
Yeah,
Fame.
yeah. She is now in Charlie Crimebuster's Hall of Shame, I
And
guess
Hall
we'd
of
have to say,
Shame.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, well,
But
back.
again, emotional maturity. Where
Yeah.
is it?
Yeah. Oh,
Where
yeah.
did it go? Yeah.
And road rage.
A road rage,
Rage.
yeah.
Yeah.
Goodness gracious,
I know. I know. Well, back to our second trial of Karen Reed. Is it normal
Mhm.
for the investigators to get into the phone of investigators themselves? Is that a normal
that is not a normal
process?
thing, and a lot of people are wondering. We talked about just a few minutes ago. We're talking about how would you like it if your phone,
Yeah.
everybody went through it, and it was all for the whole world to see, and it's not. I would just challenge people out there. How many times have you ever heard that they took the investigator's phone and it became evidence and public knowledge? It doesn't happen. It's not very normal. Not very normal at all. I mean, you've got to have some sort of probable cause to get a warrant to do that.
So
And
it does require a warrant then, right?
yes, well, yeah, it requires a warrant to do that. And but what broke this case, and again, what really, I mean, you talk about something that impacted this case and really took this case to another level was the fact when the federal government, when the feds decided to investigate the investigation.
Mm,
And when the feds decided to investigate the investigation because they were, I guess they had some sort of probable cause to believe that maybe the investigation wasn't really what it should be.
right.
So then when the feds get involved, when you get the federal government looking into your life, you can rest assured that privacy is probably going to go right out the window.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and so since the feds got in and they were investigating the investigation, then that did lead to the fact that those who are involved in the investigation are now being investigated, and that's how that all come to be. It's not normal. You probably won't see this happen. Maybe never ever again, or if you do, very few times. But the fact that the federal government, the feds, begin to investigate the investigation is why. And here's the other thing, James. From all that I can understand, and maybe unless you've seen something different, it appears to me that the investigation is over and that they did not find anything, to the point that they could charge anybody with anything. So,
Mm-hmm.
basically, the investigation says that no, I'm sure that there are some recommendations, and I'm sure they might be talking about the fact that it wasn't professional, and they may be talking about the fact that it wasn't appropriate and it wasn't ethical and all that, but that there was no way that the investigators at this point really broke the law of what they were doing. And so but that's the way that his phone became public knowledge because it became a part of the investigation.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, thank you, Charlie. Okay, so let's talk again about the text that was entered into the Safari tab that said that was the phrase "How long does it take to die in the cold?"
It's really funny when well, I'm funny. Nothing about this is funny, but it's strange. In the first trial, if you remember when that happened, man,
Mm-hmm.
that was that Perry Mason moment
Mm-hmm.
in the first trial.
Yep. Yep.
Goodness gracious, Jenifer McCabe, sent a text at 2:27 in the morning. How's HOS long to die in the cold? Which means, basically that if she sent that at 2:27 in the morning, that she already knew that John O'Keefe was out there in the snow. So I mean, that really, really shook the very first trial.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But since then, since the time that came out, there has been a whole lot of information, and one of the experts that's testified for the prosecution basically has said that in your with your phone when you use Safari and you open up a tab, you can go back to that tab again and again and again and search different things. And so they're basically saying that at 2:27 in the morning that tab was open, but that she did not really make that search to after 6 something in the morning. That's what these experts are saying. Now, I'm sure that when the defense gets to their point, they're probably going to come back and find some kind of expert and say, no, no, it could have happened at early in the morning. But I've used Safari. I don't know if you have an iPhone or not, James, but
I do.
that's true. You can open up a tab and you can,
Yep.
go back to that tab again and again and again. And so the difference in this one is that I don't believe that it has the impact that it had during the first trial. And I don't know that it's going to sway the jury one way or the other. I think that, they're probably going to say what I say. It could have happened at maybe it could happen to something in the morning, or it could have happened at 6 something in the morning. And the thing though that I think is going for the prosecution in this part of it is that right along that same time she was actually doing searches about some sports team or something like that.
Mm,
And why would you if you really were involved in something like somebody dying in the snow? I
hmm.
don't think I don't think okay, now let me just check my sports out, right? I mean, I
Exactly.
think that would be on your mind all morning long, don't you?
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
know, as that goes. So I think that infamous text that had so much impact during the first trial, I think it's going to be a washout in this trial. I don't think it's going to really push the jury one way or the other. They may consider that in their thinking, but I don't think it's the thing that's going to break the case. I don't think it's the one thing that's going to cause somebody to go one way or the other in it. What do
Well,
you think?
I beg to differ in the fact that I think that if you open up a tab at 2:27 in the morning, you're specifically looking for something.
Sure, yeah. But if she had then, if she had then looked up about those sports team, wouldn't that give it reason for them to do it?
That's cover.
Yeah, well, it could be. Yeah, it could well be. Right.
You know, that's just to cover your
I'm
bases.
really anxious to see how the defense handles it because right now we know that the text has been really brought up by the prosecution
Hmm.
to give their side of it. I do know that certainly in cross examination, Jackson really I think made some points with it, but I do think it's going to be interesting to see. The defense hasn't put their side on yet. I think it's going to be interesting to see how they handle the text. And
True.
if they handle the text differently, then maybe what I think is going to be a washout, it may become a very important part of the trial.
That's true. Well, Sergeant Buchanan told it all. What did you mean by that?
Well, it literally, I sat there and and what three something days, right?
Yeah, yeah, 3 days.
And you can pretty well. Here's the idea. The idea of the prosecution. They wanted to get away from Proctor. The Proctor
Hmm.
factor.
Hmm.
Because he was a cancer all over the case. And he's the one that really tanked this investigation, as far as I'm concerned. So they want to get away from that. So they used Sergeant Mechanic, which was his supervisor, and they decided they were going to do everything that Proctor would testify he would testify for it. So they started from the very beginning. You can see the prosecution laying out their whole case. You can
Hmm.
see everything going through him. And then here comes Alan Jackson. And
Hmm.
then you hear the whole defense's case. I mean, they they use him to really go after the investigation. I mean, and really think about it. I think just about everything was covered. The only thing
Yeah.
that I don't think that was covered is what's going to happen with the experts that are coming on now, that will be
Hmm.
coming on, that was going to be talking about the injuries that he had and who can speak to whether those injuries, are consistent with being hit by a vehicle, or those injuries were consistent with being beat up in a fight. That's the only thing that I did not see them really push him in that area. Although they really begin to touch it
Hmm.
because if you remember in cross examinations, Mechanic was kind of leaning toward when he looked at the injuries that this might be a domestic. He said a
Exactly.
domestic, and so he thought the domestic would have to do with Karen Reed at that point. And little did he know that, according to the defense, they don't think that it was a domestic. They think it was just a downright fight that happened in the house. So
Mm-hmm.
in a
Mm-hmm.
way, he even touched that too, with that.
He
So
did. Yep.
so this is a witness, literally, that said it all. I mean, he covered the very beginning, right down to the end, and I think it was really amazing how this guy has been on the stand for 3 days, and I think if you didn't find anything else in the trial, you could probably listen to that whole situation and
Mm-hmm.
have a pretty good idea of what's going on in the trial.
Oh, he did disclose too that that he didn't see anything in the front yard.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, tell us about the brilliant move by the defense last week.
I thought this was really brilliant. In the first trial, the prosecution used the text between Karen Reed and Brian, the ATF agent, not Brian Albert,
Brian Higgins.
Brian Higgins, yeah. And it was really embarrassing. Oh, I don't want to say embarrassing, but it really made Karen look bad.
Mm-hmm.
She's hitting on this guy, even though she's John's girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the prosecution really used that to really batten down the hatches on her having some sort of motive in it. But so this time, through the sergeant that's on the stand, that
Mm-hmm.
telling it all, he used the sergeant to read the text. Now, in the first trial, the prosecution would only share certain of those texts,
Right.
the ones that made her look the worst. So Jackson, he decided to let the jury hear the whole context of it from the very
Exactly.
beginning. And they
Exactly.
went through every single text. And as you go through every single text, there's a couple things you see. You can see at first that she was coming on very strong to him. But
Mm-hmm.
then you can see as it went on down the line, he began to come on strong to her, and she began to withdraw. In fact, there were times he said, you ghosted me. Where were you? That sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Even all up to the fact that that night when they were in the bars, uh, Brian actually sent a text to her while they were in the same building together. So now Alan Jackson is taking this thing that made her look so bad, and it's really setting up the third party. The I call it the SOD defense.
Mm-hmm.
SOD.
Mm-hmm.
Some other dude did it, and he actually turned that text situation around to where now, if you're sitting there in the jury, you're thinking, "Who is this Brian guy?"
Right. Right.
And he had motive to have a fight with him. And
Right.
even at the very end, when to Buchanan, he says, "Looky there," and you can see, with the video there in the bar that
Mm-hmm.
wasn't shown in the first trial. You can see him like wave and say, "Come on out here, let's get in a fight, meet me
Mm-hmm.
outside," that type
Mm-hmm.
of thing. Now,
Mm-hmm.
whether he meant that or not, but I do know I saw the other Brian put his arm down, so it looked like that he was kind of holding him back. So Jackson, in a brilliant move, took something that was a strength for the prosecution in the first trial and has now turned it around, I believe, as a strength for the defense in this next trial. I thought it was brilliant, didn't you?
I did. I did. I did.
I
Really,
mean, the
very,
way that
very,
he turned it right around,
very
those
creative. Yeah. Very
yeah,
creative.
very creative. And in those texts, there was some really crazy stuff. And then, just to give the folks a little spoiler on this coming week, they have now found another video that they're introducing regarding Brian Higgins and where he went that night,
Mm-hmm.
that morning,
Mm-hmm.
which there's some really suspicious stuff going on there. So
Mm-hmm.
so,
Mm-hmm.
folks, lots of exciting things coming up next week as you join with us.
That's right. So join us next week, this coming
Yes,
Sunday.
sir.
Actually, we'll drop it on Monday morning.
Yeah, it's just been it's an amazing case. I don't know that I've ever seen a case like this anywhere
A
in the
lot of
crime in area.
a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, and the thing I think that's so intriguing about this, we are all fascinated, of course, with Lori Vallow, the
Mm-hmm.
Doomsday Mother, and
Yep.
all of that. But right up from the very beginning, everybody knew that she was guilty. Everybody knew that this was a
Mm-hmm.
terrible, terrible thing. But and a lot of others we know that too.
Right.
But in this situation, the mystery that really holds us is that you know the there are so many people that believe one way and so many people believe the other, you know.
That's
So
right.
how in the world, James, are they going to get a jury to come to any consensus with this thing? That's what I'm thinking. You know, how's it going to happen? Will it happen? Who knows?
Well, I think there's been enough doubt introduced into the trial that she will be found not guilty. That's
You
my
think
opinion.
you think it'll be not guilty, not a hung jury? You think
Nope,
she'll get not guilty this time, huh?
not guilty. Yep.
All righty.
There's too many
Well,
what ifs.
all right, folks. There's James. He's telling you what he thinks. What do you think out there? Let us
That's
know,
right.
right? Yeah.
That's
Love
right.
to hear from folks. Love to hear from folks.
All right.
All right, folks. Thanks you for joining with us tonight. We appreciate it. We always love talking crime with
Yes, we
all
do.
of our folks out there. Thank you for being a part of the podcast and YouTube. Don't forget to like us on there,
Right.
subscribe, become a part of it, and join us next week, same time. And we'll share more exciting things that's happening in Karen Reed's re-murder trial. So until this time next time, this is Charlie Crimebuster reminding you, stay safe, stay alert. Yep, for the life you save, it could be your very own.
You have been listening to Charlie Crimebuster. You can find additional podcasts at charliecrimebuster.com. You can also support our first responders, military, and law enforcement communities at peacemakernetwork.com. Or subscribe to our YouTube channel using tag @CharlieCrimebuster. Even visit our Facebook page, facebook.com/CharlieCrimebuster. Or if you would like to make suggestions for future podcasts, please send your ideas to charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you will join us next week for another exciting crime story with Charlie Crimebuster.